Hope everybody is enjoying the 4th of July. While I wait for family to get back and hopefully not burn the house down doing some barbecuing, I figure we'll do something a little bit differently. People have been requesting me doing kind of like my personal favorite games or a top 5, top 10 list for some time. I got a few minutes to kill. So in honor of tonight's stream, I want to talk about some of my favorite open world games and what elements need to be in them for it to get onto that list. Since this is the first time we're doing a list like this on the channel, I don't know what kind of rules we'll set up. I'm thinking maybe like a top 5, top 6, and this is certainly not going to be in any order, as my personal preferences for games tend to shift with the phases of the moon. But the open world genre definitely came into popularity during the early thousands, with of course Grand Theft Auto and the rise of 3D engines and technology. But when I think about some of my personal favorites, there are several criteria that I use that kind of helped, steered my list. So the first one, is movement enjoyable? Is it fun to go from point A to point B in this game? Or am I just literally driving a car for 5 to 10 minutes to get to the next checkpoint? And with that, you can probably guess that Grand Theft Auto is not going to be on this list today. The next point, are there a variety of ways of actually playing the game? As in, can I do different things? Is it just me repeating the same, 3-hit combo again and again? And I guess the final point that I like is just how open is the world? Can I, really get all around this place? Or is it a case of invisible walls? Or, the environment itself is just not all that interesting to explore? But with that said, here's my, top 5 or top 6. And the first one's kind of going to be my honorable mention. And that is the Prototype series. Prototype was developed as the spiritual successor to Hulk Ultimate Destruction. And when developers lost the IP, or the license for it, they decided to create their own take on it. And what we got was kind of the grim-dark version of that game. Protagonist that was pretty much an amnesiac Cypher, who then became the bad guy in the second game. And the game itself had really great moment-to-moment gameplay, with the fact that you could transform your guy into, or you transform his arms into tentacles, super steel arms, a giant hammer. He could eat people. He was like one part the Thing. It was just an insane game. But the problem, and something that we see with some of these open world games, is that you either have your main character be too powerful and they just steamroll over everything, or they're so weak until they level up that the game just becomes a slog to play through until they get to that point. It was one of the things that annoyed me a little bit about kind of the Far Cry formula, Horizon Zero Dawn, and some of those other examples. And Prototype just, it didn't seem like they knew what they wanted to do with the story. Again, the fact that the main character in the first game becomes the evil guy in the second game, but maybe he's not evil, but then he turns out to be evil, and then what happens to the protagonist of the second game, we don't know because the franchise ended. But the officially number 5 on my list, well, is Hulk Ultimate Destruction. This was the game that, again, came out during that very weird era of open world or licensed games, when licensed games usually sucked. And what we got was perhaps one of the best depictions of the Hulk in a video game, and something that I've been wanting to see more of since, and we haven't gotten it. Even though there was a pseudo-sequel based on, I think this was the movie with Eric Bana or Edward Norton. I forget when that second Hulk game came out. But this was just basically described as, here's the Hulk, here's an open world, smash. The game introduced the idea of weaponizing various mechanics or elements in the field to basically give the Hulk additional moves. And the Hulk played very much like a pseudo-fighting game in terms of the sheer number of ways you could fight enemies. They introduced combo finishers or special finishers for enemies, as well as rage moves. The thing that hurt the Hulk, that was not easy to say, was that they introduced boss fights. And the boss fight just removed all the aspects of the open world gameplay and put the player into a fixed arena. This is something that we also saw in Dying Light, which also really ruined that game for me as well. And the Hulk had some very annoying boss fights. I remember the final fight with the Abomination was one part boss fight, second part protect this area or protect this point mission. So the boss would just like kick you or punt you over there, and then he would go attack the mission critical target. And it was annoying, but I did appreciate the fact that the developers included like comic book covers as collectibles, and was just again a really great game in terms of the player moving around. You could do a charge jump. I forget if you could do a glide in that. But a lot of what I saw in Hulk Ultimate Destruction kind of found its way into Saints Row, I think I want to say 3rd or 4th. I forget when that series jumped the shark. But the next game on my list is definitely one that I'm sure everyone here is well aware of and will probably be playing later tonight, and that is the Just Cause franchise. We'll be looking at Just Cause 3, but the game that made me fall in love with things was Just Cause 2. And again, this is a great example of how a series just kind of kept iterating on its design, and we saw a major jump from the first to the second. The first game was more of a mission focus, but with very wide maps. The second game just went completely open world, and I think was one of the first games to just deliver on this idea of here's just a massive game space, do whatever you want in it. And the game was very much open-ended. You had mission-critical stuff, but you were free to explore, blow stuff up, steal everything that wasn't nailed down, blow more stuff up, and kick people. Oh, and did I mention you blow stuff up in it? But what made the Just Cause franchise really work for me, I think for everybody else, was the movement of that game. While you could certainly drive a car from point A to point B, we all know the best form of travel was grapple hook into parachute. And main series star Rico Rodriguez, hopefully I didn't butcher that too much, definitely taught us just how great it was to have an infinite parachute you could use at all times. And I know with the third one they introduced a wingsuit, which I'm sure we'll be looking at later this evening on. But again, my favorite open world games make the movement or the moment-to-moment gameplay enjoyable, and everything else just grows from that. And that is just pretty much the Just Cause franchise in a nutshell. The next game is another one that definitely went for open world, or went from great movement, and that is of course Crackdown, and specifically Crackdown 1. What Crackdown 1 did was not only introduce this idea of an open mission structure, with the fact that you were hunting down these various enemies or these various gang leaders, but it also gave us the ever popular phrase, skills for kills. But of all the open world games that I've played, this is the one that made the collectible hunt the most enjoyable. And that is of course in the form of the agility orbs. Every time you picked up an agility orb, not only did it improve your base jump by I think it was like 1% or something like that, but it also raised your agility level. As your agility went up, you could run faster, jump higher, and just basically turn the entire city into your own parkour playground. And it's the only game, or the only open world game that I play that really embodied that sense of progression, and giving the player that sense of scale along with it. As I said a few minutes ago, one of my big problems with something like Horizon Zero Dawn, the Far Cry franchise, and even the Assassin's Creed series, was that they locked so much of your cool stuff behind the leveling curve or the RPG system that it made the beginning of these games feel very sluggish and very boring. While in Crackdown, you weren't jumping over buildings in a single bound in the first minute, but you could see that progression going from your very first part of the city to your second to your third, and by the end of that game, while you were still having to kind of balance what you were doing, you still could go back to those earlier areas and just see just how much of a difference there was in movement. The next game on my list is probably the most recent entry and may be the most polarizing, and that is Breath of the Wild. When Nintendo does open world, they apparently do it really, really well. And Breath of the Wild is probably on this list the quote-unquote most focused of the open world games. The world itself is hard-coded. You have these literal points of, or metaphorical points of interest, but how you could explore and power Link up, as well as his interaction with the world, are the highlights of that game. And Breath of the Wild is probably the only open world game that we've played that truly, I think, came the closest to emergent game design or emergent level design. And that's in how Link's maneuvers or Link's options impacted the world around him. You could blow something up and try to drop stuff on an enemy. You could trick enemies into going to a field of grass and setting that field on fire. You, of course, had everybody's favorite, the glide, which speedrunners made use of to some insane strategies of just like shooting Link up in the air and then having him travel and fly all over the place. And there's so much we could talk about with Breath of the Wild that if I get into it, we'll just be spending tons and tons of time in this video on. Probably like another, I guess, second place or runner-up for this list would be something like Prey 2016. But I think I enjoy more the emergent behavior or the open world behavior in Breath of the Wild more than I did Prey. But the fact that Nintendo was able to do this in the Zelda world, which has always been open world, but very limited in what you could do in it, is just an amazing feat. And I think, like a lot of people, I'm very excited to see what they're going to do with a sequel. Or I'm not sure if it's going to be like an expansion follow-up or something along those lines. But I've been talking straight for almost 12 minutes now, so we're going to do a quick shout out to our Patreon supporters and sponsors. And when I come back, I'll talk about my final game on this list. And now a quick shout out to our current Game Wisdom Patreon supporters and sponsors. And if you'd like to continue this discussion on game design, be sure to check out our Discord channel, linked down below. For the last game on my list, I'm going with an oldie but a goodie. And it's one that I think everybody is well aware of, and that is Spider-Man 2. Keep in mind I have not played the recent entry by Insomniac. But when I think about open world games, I really got this idea of movement being the most enjoyable part of the game. Spider-Man 2 definitely fits that bill. This is a game, or the first one, that tried to make it as realistically as possible the act of swinging around on spider webs in the city of New York. Throw in cameos by Bruce Campbell, and one thing that I really liked about the game that very few open world style games have done since is this idea of the game being a day in the life simulator for the main character. One of the issues that I find with a lot of open world games from a story point of view is that they typically focus on this grand sweeping story that the world will come to an end, but you still have 30 hours you can spend doing little side quests and collectibles. With Spider-Man 2 structure, the game was designed basically as pretty much each day of Peter Parker being Spider-Man, and of course having small nods and tie-ins to the movie at the time. But it gave them the flexibility to throw in the various villains of Spider-Man's universe, and just kept things more varied, and it made sense to have all these additional activities because, well, Spider-Man's just going around the city on a day-to-day basis. And for people who played Spider-Man on the PS4, I'm curious how the swinging held up in that one. For those of you who don't remember, following Spider-Man 2, the company also worked on the Ultimate Spider-Man game, and that one greatly downplayed the swinging mechanics. And I just felt very disappointed by that one at the time. Now, one of the developers from that game did go on to make the indie game Energy Hook, but when I tried playing that one, he kind of overcomplicated the swinging aspect of the game, and it just didn't seem to have that great pick up and play feel that Spider-Man 2 did. And it's very interesting how several of the games on my favorite lists came from that era of licensed property games usually being bad. And I just wonder if it was because of the fact that the companies kind of expected these games to be bad, so they just license them off, thinking, I guess, just like passing it around kind of thing. But developers really use them in creative ways. One open world game that I never played that I heard very mixed things about was the Superman game, and how they try to make it more interesting than Superman just flying around punching stuff. But that's my list, so I'm going to get this all edited up. Thanks for watching this video. Let me know what you think about these little top lists if you want to see more of them on the channel. Have a great 4th of July, and I will see you guys later tonight for, I guess, our little mini celebration. If you're looking for a book on design, my first title, 20 Essential Games to Study, is out now. It is available where most books are sold, and it comes in paper, hardcover, or digital copies. This is the perfect book for anyone interested in learning about game design, whether you are a student, enthusiast, or just a fan. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoy things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel link down below where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.